Welcome to Wheelock's Latin, Chapter 16. In this chapter, we're going to learn about third declension adjectives. First, let's look at what the dictionary entry means for an adjective. Up to this point, we've been studying 2-1-2 adjectives. An example of a 2-1-2 adjective is magnus, magna, magnum. In this dictionary entry, the first part is the masculine, the second part is the feminine, and the last one is the neuter. All of them are nominative singular. We call this 2-1-2 because the masculine and the neuter follow the second declension and the feminine follows the first declension. We also learned a variation on this, the special IUS adjectives in Chapter 9, like unus, una, unum. For these ones, they're mostly 2-1-2 adjectives, except the genitive singular ends in IUS and the dative singular ends in long I. So for today, let's look at some third declension adjectives. There are three different ways that the dictionary entry might look. So let's start with the first one. For example, acer, acris, acre, which means harsh or bitter. The first part is the masculine, the second part, acris, is feminine, and the last part, acre, is neuter. All of them are nominative singular. Because there is a different form for the masculine and for the feminine and for the neuter, we call this a three-termination adjective, with three different endings for each of the three genders. You might also see a dictionary entry that looks like omnis, omne. If it looks like this, the first one is masculine and feminine, and the second one is neuter. Both of them are nominative singular. We call this one a two-termination adjective because the masculine and the feminine are identical in their forms. The last kind of dictionary entry that you might see is potens potentis. In this one, the first part of the dictionary entry is the nominative singular for all genders, and the second part of the dictionary entry is the genitive singular for all genders. We call this one a one-termination adjective because all three genders share the same endings in the nominative singular. The one-termination adjectives don't follow a set pattern for what the nominative looks like, so you have to look at the genitive, the second part of the dictionary entry, to see that it ends in is. Some other examples of one-termination adjectives that we'll learn in later chapters are vetus, veteris, which means old, and pauper, pauperis, which means poor. So now let's look at the actual declension endings for these adjectives. Let's use, for example, a two-termination adjective. We'll use omnis, omne, which means all or every. You'll see that the masculine and feminine share the same form, omnis, and the neuter is omne. All three genders have the same genitive form, omnis. All three genders have the same dative, omni. Then we split them up, masculine and feminine accusative singular is omnem, but as you know, neuter accusative singular is always, always, always identical to the neuter nominative singular, therefore that form is omne. All three genders share the same ablative singular, omni. Then we split up again for the nominative plural, omnes for masculine and feminine, omnia for neuter. Combined omnium for all three genders, genitive plural, then omnibus. Split them up for the accusative plural, omnes and omnia, and then everything ablative plural is omnibus, all genders. You'll notice that you have I's everywhere that you might expect an I from an I stem noun. So ablative singular, I, all three genders. Neuter, accusative, and nominative plural, omnia, and then genitive plural for everything is omnium. A three-termination adjective looks mostly the same as the two-termination. The only difference is that the masculine and feminine nominative singular have two different forms. So, for example, acer, separate form from acris in the nominative singular. But after that, the masculine and feminine share the same form for the remaining gender and numbers and cases. The neuter, acre, the forms will be identical to what we just learned for the two-termination omne. So let's erase that and look at more detail at a one-termination adjective. Recall that in the one termination adjectives, all three genders share the same form for the nominative singular. So I'm using, for our example, ingains ingentis, which means huge or large. Ingains is the nominative for all three genders, and ingentis is the genitive for all three genders. Then we have ingenti for all three genders. As you might expect, we'll split them up for the accusative singular, ingentem for the masculine and feminine, but ingains for the neuter accusative singular, because the neuter accusative always is identical to the neuter nominative. For the ablative, ingenti for all three genders. In the nominative plural, we split them up. Masculine and feminine get ingentes. Neuter gets ingentia. But then combined ingentium, ingentibus, split them up again, ingentes, ingentia, and then ingentibus for all three genders. You'll notice here, again, the same I's that you saw in the two termination. Ablative singular, neuter accusative and nominative plural, and genitive plural for all three genders. So last up in this lesson, let's look at some adjective usage and word order. We learned long ago that the attributive adjective is the simple modifier of a noun. So in the example, weary fortes, that is an attributive adjective where strong modifies men. In Latin, it's common to put the noun before the adjective. FYI, if you look in the textbook in Wheelock, there is a typo. They have left the long I off of the end of weary. We also learned long ago that you could have an adjective in the predicate position. In the example sentence, weary sunt fortes, now this is a complete sentence where weary is the subject, sunt is the verb, and fortes is the predicate. We call it the predicate nominative because it agrees with the subject and they are both in the nominative. This sentence means the men are brave. We also learned that adjectives can be used as substantives, which means the adjective is standing in the place of a noun. So in the sample sentence, fortuna fortes adiuvat, which means fortune favors the brave. Fortuna is the subject, fortes is the object, and adiuvat is the verb. Fortes, the object, is a substantive adjective. It's an adjective standing in the place of a noun. It's masculine, accusative, and plural, and because this substantive adjective is masculine, we can translate it as brave men if we would like. So either fortune favors brave men, or in English you can also make a substantive and say fortune favors the brave. Last in this chapter is a new one that we have talked about in class from time to time, the object complement. You can also call it the predicate accusative. So in the sample sentence, virtus fecit viros fortes, virtus is the subject, virtue or valor, fecit, made, verb, men, direct object. What did they make men? It made men brave. That is the predicate accusative or the object complement. So viros is the direct object. Fortes is the predicate to the object. You find predicate accusatives, aka object complements, in sentences that have the pattern I make X into Y, where X is the direct object and Y is the object complement. We will keep practicing this type of sentence for the next several chapters. That's it for now. See you next time.